and diversity that fuels open debate in our society. I'm worried that the current FCC is heading down a dangerous path on both of these principles. Recent statements from Chairman Carr echoing the president, threatening to revoke broadcast licenses for presenting content unfavorable to the administration has chilled protected speech. And the FCC's push to eliminate or relax broadcast ownership rules and to welcome consolidation in media threaten the independence and diversity of local media that are critical to an informed citizenry. Just consider, we have pending before us the Nexstar merger with Tegna, combining national broadcast companies with more than 250 broadcast stations, combining multiple broadcast licenses in the top markets that are the most popular broadcast television stations, and having ownership in 2/3 of all markets, covering almost 80% of all households in the country, even though this appears to violate the limit Congress set at half that level. Chairman Carr seems to be moving forward. And this is on the heels of Skydance, backed by Oracle's owner, Mr. Larry Ellison, buying Paramount Global CBS, now seeking to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, more studios, more networks, cable channels, and Mr. Ellison appearing to pick up about a 20% stake in TikTok. And the FCC is also considering allowing companies to own multiple national networks. These deals, and certainly more to follow, likely threaten to build a form of private censorship through outsized media power. It is time to update the law and establish new guardrails to promote local, diverse, and independent media. The threat to democracy also comes from the dominant information distribution systems controlled by Google, Meta with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Apple with its App Store. Here, the Trump administration has done an excellent job challenging these companies' monopolistic behavior, continuing the antitrust enforcement from the Biden administration. However, antitrust is not enough to eliminate the enormous power of these tech platforms. More needs to be done. Congress must give antitrust enforcers more tools to truly open up the tech information distribution platforms and modern media markets to robust competition. We need to reduce concentration of control in these markets, private control that can censor just as the government can censor. In conclusion, I want to say it is really time for Congress to update the Communications Act, to jump in and put an end to the threat of the bullying that we're seeing from the FCC, which chills speech and eliminates open debate and information flow in our media. And it's time to stop media consolidation and monopolization that puts too much control over the marketplace of ideas in too few hands. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for testimony. And I guess I'll just start there with just a quick question. So, Mr. Kimmelman, you are the CEO of a group called Public Knowledge, is that correct?
I was at one point, sir.
Okay. What years were you the CEO of Public Knowledge?
2014 to 2019.
Okay. Okay. Let's just take a DeLorean back in time to the COVID era. What do you think it's appropriate for these sort of NGOs or nonprofits to work hand in hand with government agencies to flag misinformation or disinformation or malinformation?
Mr. Chairman, I've worked with NGOs for many, many years, and I think it's appropriate on the left, on the right, for them to present ideas to the government, to the major players in the marketplace about their views. That's what I was involved in.
Well, let me get more specific then. Do you think it's appropriate that the White House was working directly through a number of different agencies to work with the University of Washington and Stanford Information to sort of outsource their censorship enterprise, to find out what the posts that they didn't like, and then work with, and then collude with at least, or coerce social media companies to punish those folks?
Well, Senator, I think I've seen the government in many instances work with
I'm asking about this
contractors.
instance because it wasn't like a galaxy far, far away. It was like a few years ago.
Yeah,
Do you think that's appropriate?
I'm not familiar with the details of what might or might not happen there.
What about the scenario I just gave you, though?
Working with a university to
flag misinformation so that the government then can coerce social media companies to throttle.
I never think government should coerce social media companies, so I can't imagine that part of it is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Davis, your testimony described how in the summer of 2020, Google attempted to demonetize the Federalist following your critiques of violent Black Lives Matter riots. It's documented that the Center for Countering Digital Hate, the CCDH, specifically worked to demonetize the Federalists for these critiques. Could you just describe what tactics specifically were employed to do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing that up. So I believe it was in July of 2020. We started receiving emails from an NBC News reporter based out of the UK. I don't remember her name exactly. And they were almost taunting, asking for comment. Hey, Federalist, how does it feel knowing Google's is about to demonetize you for hate speech or something like that? I'm paraphrasing. And this was news to us. We hadn't broken any rules. We had gotten no notifications of breaking rules, that we had violated Google's terms and conditions or AdSense's or whatever. And so we started calling around to contacts at Google and learned that, oh yeah, you are about to be demonetized because of hate speech, was what we were told. We had racist, violent hate speech, which was not true at all. And it was the CCDH who was working with this NBC News, I think it was called the verification unit at the time. They were working together and colluding with executives at Google, to this day, I don't know who, to come in and secretly demonetize us. And what I found most offensive about it was they were all in on it. They had news articles ready to be written, kind of crowing about how we got demonetized. We were able to fight back. We had a pretty robust response to that, and they ended up relenting. Largely, what was interesting was in that initial news article targeting us, they had cited that news article, how the media are lying to you about literally everything, including the riots. The NBC News ended up stealth editing that out, and they worked with Google to come up with a new rationale for demonetizing us, which was our comments were mean. We had an unmoderated comment section, so we ended up having to delete our comment section to avoid being demonetized by Google because a bunch of foreign connected government outfits decided that they didn't like what we were publishing.
Okay. In limited time, I want to, Mr. Berenson, it's clear now that during the Biden administration, CISA, which is mentioned a lot in this report, obviously, operated kind of a switchboarding mechanism during this period, flagging disfavored content from domestic sources for social media platforms. Based on what you've seen, how was CISA specifically doing this? What was the abuse really all about?
Well, again, I think you laid it out. They redefined infrastructure. So it wasn't actual physical infrastructure or software infrastructure. It was things people were saying. And there was a period very early in 2022 when they actually tried to redefine terrorism as quote unquote misinformation. There's a bulletin from February 2022, which I think DHS put out and then retracted under pressure. So, once you start saying that people's speech is terrorism, you're going down a bad path. And I don't think that's something that either party should do, honestly.
Thanks. Ranking Member Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to yield to my colleague for a second to make a statement, then I'll finish with my questions.
Thank you. I'll do my questions on the record because I have to leave, but I wasn't going to speak, and I appreciate Senator Cantwell's willingness to let me say a few words here, given what happened in my state this summer. First of all, I think Mr. Kimmelman knows that I've been out front on monopoly issues and antitrust and making sure that we have true competition in the marketplace. Working with Senator Cruz and Senator Lee and Senator Kennedy and many others on that issue, and I continue to believe that it's a legitimate solution. Secondly, I think what happened with the chair of the FCC was wrong in the last month. I appreciated Senator Cruz being out front on it, I truly do, and calling it out, and I'm looking forward to that hearing to try to get some sense into what's going on there. With not just the Jimmy Kimmel moment, but many others. Third, I think that the AI piece of this, and I'll ask some questions about this, but to me, it should not be that radical that we say, number one, that if speech is violent or it incites violence, that is different than other kinds of speech, but that with these AI videos where you can't even tell it's yourself or not, I had this experience at a hearing, that they could at least be labeled. It is always going to be litigation over whether something is the violent side and the hate side, or whether it is the legally, constitutionally allowed speech, like parody. But at the very least, these videos should say something about prepared for by AI or digitally created. I just happened to be late on CNN last night, and Robin Williams' family was on one of the shows talking about how he's dead, and they've created AI videos that don't say digitally altered that people think are real. So people should have the right over their own identity. And the last thing, when it comes to these horrific mass shootings and acts of violence, I have come to see it as all-purpose haters, which is something that the FBI actually said after the Annunciation church shooting in Minnesota, because that shooter actually hated President Trump in the manifesto, hated wokeness, hated Jews, hated Muslims, hated Hispanics, hated blacks, and shot these two little kids, Fletcher and Harper, through stained glass windows in a Catholic church. Then you go to the shooting of my dear friend, and I had a good discussion with FBI Director Patel about this in Judiciary. He lost his friend, Charlie Kirk, and we mourn that, and we lost our friend, Melissa Hortman. That shooter literally had a manifesto or ramblings that targeted mostly, and in fact, all Democratic office holders, and he went to the houses of the people that he knew the addresses, and the ones that he didn't, he wasn't able to go to. He went after law firms, businesses, went after Planned Parenthood, and then left an actual letter saying that he did it because he was supposed to assassinate me, which is on X about every 5 minutes with my name with assassination, which I think is completely not a good idea for public safety, but I can't get it off. So the point of all this is that to say it's one side or another, when you look at the Cato Institute report that came out this year of this extremism and what's triggering these basically mad murderers to commit these acts, whether it's in the Michigan temple or whether it is Charlie Kirk in Utah, I just don't think it is the right approach to be like it's one side or the other. These people have been targeted in their heads, and they go out and create these mass crimes. And it's on us to figure out what's triggering them and to actually do something about it instead of playing the blame game. One of my answers is an assault weapon ban, or at least 21 years and under. That would have helped in Uvalde, Buffalo, Parkland, doing something about this instead of just blaming each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Mr. Davis, government censorship in the name of fact-checking is an unacceptable trampling on our democratic values. Knowing what we know now, how should social media companies respond if the government comes to them to deplatform users based on their political opinions? What's your suggestion?
That's a great question. Thank you for raising it. If I could wave a magic wand and create a solution or a response there, what I would say is anytime a government goes to a social media platform, Google, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, and they tell someone you need to take this down because it's hate speech or misinformation or whatever fancy label they want to throw on speech they don't like, first off, those tech companies should tell them to take a hike. We don't censor anyone. We're a platform. We're not a content company. And then number two, I think they should have to disclose it to the public and the people who were targeted. I would love to have known in 2020 who was actually behind the censorship of me and my colleagues. We knew we were being censored because we watched it happen. We saw our posts disappear. We saw ourselves being shadow banned. We didn't actually know why. I would say to this day, we don't actually understand the full extent of the government effort to censor us. So I think there should be full disclosure following an absolute denial of any sort of censorship demands from government. It's totally inappropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Berenson, I thank you for sharing your experience of being deplatformed by Twitter. It's a valuable story for us to hear. You spoke of a huge influence that you witnessed between Twitter and the White House at the time back in 2020, and you described your understanding that the company's lobbyists hoped to keep the White House target off their back. Can you explain specifically what your understanding of that target was, and are you aware of any specific threats that were made?
Sure. So in July 2021, as the Biden administration was preparing vaccine mandates, and that's sort of what you have to understand about the backdrop here, and they knew that those might be politically unpopular, they started pressuring the companies to deplatform people like me. I mean, they'd been doing this, but they upped the pressure, and that's when President Biden said that Facebook was quote unquote killing people by allowing people like me or RFK Jr. to speak. And you know, the biggest legal protection that social media companies have is what's called Section 230, as I'm sure you know, where they're essentially immune from lawsuits from users over the decisions they make for content. So they have all the immunity of a traditional publisher to make decisions over what speech they want to carry.
Did the White House, do you have any kind of information or records? Did the White House specifically say what they would do to Twitter?
Well, so they specifically, well, they publicly said that they were going to reconsider Section 230. That was, again, in July. And they had privately said to Twitter in April, they had, based on Twitter's own records, said a really, quote unquote, a really hard question about why I was still being allowed to speak, which from my point of view and my lawyer's point of view, that all by itself was a First Amendment violation because it forced Twitter to start looking at me in a way that Twitter had not previously done. And that was in secret. And, you know, and I'll say this.
And again, there was no transparency.
No transparency.
That Mr. Davis spoke in.
Yes. So, I mean, look, I don't like what Brendan Carr did, but he did it publicly, and we can have a debate about it. What's really problematic is when the government goes in secret to these companies and targets individual users or individual categories of speech. And I think that that shouldn't be allowed. I think that both parties should agree that targeting an individual user or an individual post, as you know, if it's legal, is wrong. And nobody's ever said that I'd said anything illegal. And actually, I think most people now would agree that a lot of what I said has been confirmed. So I think that that's a pretty basic place to start.
Thank you. Mr. Volokh, you mentioned a reporting mechanism that might be a promising idea for companies that think the government is coercing them. Can you describe to the committee how such a mechanism might have prevented a situation that Mr. Berenson just described, and how would you structure that mechanism?
Sure. So this is the familiar line that sunlight is the best disinfectant. There may, in fact, be certain kinds of requests to remove something that might be justifiable in certain situations if they're not coercive, but they're just kind of appeal to somebody's better instincts. Maybe, maybe not. But presumably it's something that members of this committee, that other members of Congress might be interested in, that reporters for newspapers might say, well, here's a list of all of these things that the government has been asking that people remove. Is it justifiable or not? Is it excessive? Does it show political bias? That's impossible to do if it's all essentially corporate secrets and government secrets.
Is there, I'm picking up on Senator Klobuchar's, I'm over time, can I finish? Thank you. Senator Klobuchar was saying is, you know, she's worried, as I think many of us are, with AI and things that are happening there, and at least to get a label, do any of you know, are these social media companies, any of these companies capable of doing that, to be able to identify when something's been tampered with AI, or if it's totally false, to be able to do that?
That is a separate question, but a very important question. There is what you're asking, I think, is the technical question, which is even if they were just to do it on their own, can they do it? So my understanding is that there are ways of determining that. They're hard to do at scale. So perhaps a forensic examiner might look at a video, but it doesn't mean that you can have an algorithm that will reliably do it, and there's going to be false positives and false negatives. There's also always going to be an arms race, right? If there's a better fake technology, better detector technology, better fake technology that evades the detector technology. I'm not up on all the details, but my understanding is right now there is no guaranteed reliable mechanism of determining.
Then maybe you
what's
get into the whole question also on what's comedy, what's satire, it opens
Yes.
up a whole another avenue then.
That's absolutely right. There certainly is no software you can write that says, oh, this is obvious parody, and therefore it shouldn't be taken down.
Thank
or
you,
labeled.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Professor Volokh, for both the, statement you made about Brendan Carr's coercive tactics, and that wouldn't be appropriate, and for your recommendations on transparency and rules that I think would be a concept of just making sure that things were clear. And to my colleague's comment, Senator Klobuchar, one of the reasons I appreciate many things she said, but one of the reasons I support the Blackburn legislation and joined her as a co-sponsored on the Copied Act is because it gives the content holders some rights, and it shows who the content holders are, and then even in the case of compensation, which is an important issue to keeping competition and perfect information. I will just note that during this debate, this committee and this body passed a public health emergency language related to deceptive practice language. It was unlawful to engage in deceptive practices related to the treatment, cure, prevention, mitigation, or diagnosis related to COVID. Why did we do that? Why did we give that extra power? Because there were a lot of crazy things online, like take bleach or what have you. And we wanted to make sure that we were protecting consumers against deceptive practices as it related to that. That was passed in a very, very big bipartisan support by by the Senate and became law. Okay, so now to this, Mr. Kimmel, this larger issue. Even my colleague from the House, who was chairman of the China committee, I see doesn't like the TikTok decision because he doesn't think it goes far enough and banning, the actual algorithm. We have this attempt by Carr to kind of realign the deck chairs at this moment that we have competition shrinking. And so that's why it's so concerning to me. And the unevenness, we had a hearing here, Facebook whistleblower who literally said the company knew that it was elevating hate speech as a way to increase the revenue for advertisers. And, I feel like that's, if a newspaper or a broadcaster puts false information in the paper, the community will respond, and that person will no longer be able to continue their business. But online, you don't even know that that's happening. And so making sure that we don't have, these challenges, what do we need to do to really get people to understand that that right now you could, in a very in a very vertical way, have such an alignment that influence that we're talking about now of not being coercive is actually done in major ways, even as my Republican colleague in the House is saying he's concerned about this as it relates to what TikTok might be doing.
Yeah. Well, Senator Cantwell, I think it's a critical issue because as the technology has changed, the entire media landscape has changed. So I think we have to update our understanding of where is the excess power being used, how is it being used. These examples you've heard today all relate to a gatekeeper in the media landscape that is a tech company. We haven't always thought of them as being part of the same ecosystem, and I think we need to do that Because if you have such enormous power over the major ways in which the public gets news, information, can keep up about whether it's their community or if it matters of public health or national affairs, we've got to make sure that they're playing by some reasonable rules or that there's full competition in the marketplace to give people the checks and balances in the media. And that's
You don't think Professor Wallach's statement about transparency is a bad idea? It's a good idea.
No, it's a great idea. I think transparency is one element of this, but it's not enough to prevent the kinds of concerns about coercion and suppression if too few people have the megaphone, have the ability to turn on the microphone for the voices that need to be part of our public debate.
And are you worried about too much content being behind paywalls? Because I am. I'm worried that the more this vertical integration, and that's why, again, I was so concerned about Chairman Carr's comments, in addition to the free speech, that if you start using this power as the FCC chairman and you just allow for all of this vertical integration, and the next thing you know, it's kind of like on the sports issue, you put so much of it behind a paywall, you know, how is the consumer just kind of constantly being shortchanged by this whole change in the landscape?
It's a huge problem, and that's why we need to make sure there's adequate ways for the companies that really invest in news and information and gathering the information that the public wants, engaging people in public debate, can finance that and present it so it's not all dumbed down and kind of diluted in an internet where there's just such massive information flow that you can't tell fact from fiction.
You're talking about localism now.
Absolutely,
Make sure that
it's localism, and it's preventing the few companies that seem to have amassed quite a bit of power already from getting any larger and acting as gatekeepers to our public debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. If there's no objection, I'd like to put into the record a letter sent from this committee back in 2018 to the chairman of the FCC requesting that Sinclair Broadcasting licenses be reviewed because in the minds of the 12 Democrats, including 2 on this committee, felt that Sinclair was perpetuating misinformation. So we'll put that into the record, which I find, given the conversations around Commissioner Carr, I find that decently ironic. Mr. Volk,
I just make a,
we can do it then. You have your time. So, Mr. Wallach, you mentioned that you came to the U.S. 50 years ago. We, to this day, congratulations. I came to America a little bit more than 50 years ago, which I hate to actually say in public testimony because it makes me feel old. How many TV stations, you probably like me had to learn English watching TV. How many TV stations and news information sources were there back then? So I do remember. The button. You have to hit the button so you can hear you.
Button. Sorry. When we came to LA, I think there were maybe 6 or 7 VHF, and then if I twiddled the antenna right, I could get like 4 or 5 UHF.
Did you listen to a lot of podcasts?
I believe that I was not allowed to listen to podcasts in 1975.
It didn't exist. It didn't exist.
Exactly.
Did you go online and get sources from online sources?
No.
Did you go on X or Facebook or Twitter? Did you open TikTok?
I
go on
did not.
Facebook, Instagram? None of that existed because I just find
better now.
I just find it interesting that my colleagues are talking about how broadcast TV and monopolism, Mr. Kimmerman, you talked about that, which I thought was just fascinating, that there's all of a sudden this lack of resources to find information when there's never been more ways to get information than there is today. But Mr. Kimmerman, I have a question for you. You're over at the Harvard School, is that correct?
At the Kennedy School, yes.
The Kennedy School? So you would agree with all of us, I think, that free speech is important. You would agree with George Washington's comment that if freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent, we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. You would agree with that, right?
Certainly.
What are you doing about Harvard's F rating for free speech?
I'm a fellow at the Kennedy School. I have a very...
No, I mean, have you spoken to your colleagues? Have you made a protest? Have you rallied the students to say, how do we get rid of this F rating? I mean, I can't imagine Harvard students would find it objectionable to have an F in anything. What are you doing about fixing Harvard?
There's a lot of discussion I know around me about trying to make sure there's an open environment for learning.
But they have an F rating, just to be clear. They have an F rating. Harvard University has an F rating in free speech, and you're here giving us lectures on free speech doesn't exactly ring very hollow. Mr. Berenson, quick question for you. We need to put on a record, what was the outrageous things that you said in 2021 that got you thrown off Twitter? I mean, were you planning to overthrow the United States government? Were you creating a militia? Like, give me an example, give me a flavor of the outrageous things that you must have said.
The tweet that got me banned from Twitter on August 28th, 2021 began, "It doesn't stop infection or transmission." Yes.
Are you saying that a mask, a cloth mask, does not stop the spread of COVID? How dare you say those kinds of outrageous comments?
I said that the mRNA vaccine did not stop infection or transmission.
And did it?
I mean, I think I might be the only person in this room who wasn't vaccinated with the mRNA vaccine, and we all got COVID.
Did the vaccine stop the
No, of course not.
So you were allowed to be wrong, but you were right. Does that make it? Now, what accountability has been in place for that? Like, who has been held accountable for this?
Well, Twitter actually admitted that they shouldn't have done that.
They admitted it. But what accountability? Because that cost you money. That cost you direct money in your pocketbook. What accountability has been put in place?
There's been none. I mean, more important than accountability, I didn't get to tell people what I thought. And I was getting hundreds of millions of views a month. People wanted to hear what I thought, and the Biden administration didn't like it, and they forced Twitter to ban me. And I will also say it is outrageous.
So you're saying the United States government, elected officials who swore an oath to the Constitution, told private media companies to terminate your account, which cost you your money. I assume you're not naturally wealthy from 5 generations of wealth, and that you actually have to work for a living. And that ability to earn an income was taken away from you because you dared to have an opinion on a vaccine?
I regard it as more important that I wasn't able to say what I thought. The money matters less to me. And I also have to say this. Pfizer made $100 billion selling that vaccine, and Pfizer officials cooperated or collaborated with the Biden administration. It is a scandal. Yeah. Let me just say one thing. If I had been reporting on plane crashes and Boeing had colluded with the Biden administration or the Trump administration, it would be a national scandal that a Boeing official had leaned on a social media company. Yeah, totally. But Pfizer somehow got away with this.
Yeah, and her opening statement, the ranking member talked extensively about protecting free speech, but then stated she wasn't referring to hate speech. I think what maybe my colleagues mean to say is speech that they hate. That's right. Because it's hate speech is in the eye of the beholder. Would you agree, Mr. Davis?
I completely agree. Hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, they're just fancy words that people use to shut down speech they don't like.
Right. So if I say that there's only such thing as a man and woman, that maybe when I got to the U.S. 50 plus years ago, somebody would have said, why did you say that? Like, obviously, there's only men and women. I come from a culture where our entire language is male or female, but that could be considered hate speech, right, if I say that?
It was for a long time. If you said that on Twitter for several years, you ran the risk of being censored, shadow banned, or permanently suspended.
Well, obviously, we'll talk more about this topic. I do find it interesting that my colleagues who were totally and completely complicit during the Biden era, that were absolutely applauding people being thrown off social media, that were saying that any commentary about a Hunter Biden laptop story being misinformation was considered an insurrectionist, that now all of a sudden clutch their pearls because a moronic second-rate comedian who makes $16 million a year got fired from his job for having atrocious ratings is somehow now an attack on free speech. I don't know that they have the moral high ground here, but thank you for your testimony, and I recognize Senator from Nevada.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today and speaking your mind. It's about the First Amendment. Appreciate that. Because the freedom to express yourself and speak your mind is the cornerstone of America. It's one of the main ways we distinguish ourselves from other nations. In the United States, you are free to criticize whomever you want, including government leaders, without government censorship. And so it is wholly appropriate and indeed necessary for this committee to hold oversight hearings that focus on protecting this critical right from being eroded by anyone. But that is not the focus of today's hearing. Rather than providing us with a forum that will evaluate truly harmful government censorship This has become increasingly commonplace under the Trump administration. We're undertaking an effort to settle old political scores against an administration that is no longer in power. There are issues that we have to deal with, and we do want to support, and we must support free speech. But this hearing is not the place. 2 weeks ago, I sent a letter to Chairman Cruz calling for the FCC chairman to testify before this committee after he threatened to revoke broadcast licenses over Jimmy Kimmel's comments criticizing President Trump. I was particularly concerned, as I know the chair was from his statements calling the threat mafia-like. Chairman Cruz called the threats mafia-like. With this clear attempt to suppress speech, comedian. However, I'm disappointed that that's not what's the focus of today's hearing. Chairman Carr's later backtracking, claiming there's some sort of local community exception to the First Amendment. There's no exceptions. You have free speech or you don't. We know those limits. There's precedent for that. His comments, Chairman Carr's, were reprehensible, and his demands of full accountability. And we demand full accountability. Indeed, his weak excuses have been repeatedly contradicted by the president's own statements. President Trump has said outright that the reason the FCC should revoke broadcast licenses is because of negative coverage of his administration. I want there to be journalism that looks at things. This is the clearest possible violation of the First Amendment. The President of the United States directing an agency to revoke a license of networks that run a critical story of him? There never would have been press or print or TV or radio. You could go back 250 years if all presidents did this. This is government censorship by our president, plain and simple. It's what they do in Russia. It's what they do in North Korea. It's what they do in China. It is not what we do in a democracy that has a First Amendment. Those attacks on free speech, they harm not only our democracy, but our economy. Last month, it was Brendan Carr's interference in the private business decisions of large media companies, but tomorrow could be tech, energy, tourism, any other industry could be impacted. In Las Vegas, we're seeing fewer international tourists because people are afraid to come to the U.S. under this administration. People planning to travel to the U.S. see this administration detaining people for posting something online that's critical of the president in another country where they live. And they cancel their trips to America out of fear of U.S. government retaliation. And the consequences for our economy are substantial. So, Mr. Kimmelman, can you discuss the direct impacts of infringement on speech rights? And can you tell us what you see as the biggest threat to the First Amendment writ large, please?
Well, the threats, coercion, chill speech. Either they suppress directly or create an environment in which everyone is afraid to speak his or her mind, to engage in debate, to have the kind of open discussion that our democracy requires. So it's extremely dangerous. Obviously, as you point out, when the government does it directly, it is horrible. It is a First Amendment violation. It needs to be stopped. But it also can happen when tech platforms become too powerful, when they don't face competition, when they play a gatekeeper role. This could be the same if there's too much roll-up of media, and it's the most popular media. Senator Moreno made a good point. There's so much more out there